What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the Hybrid Ministry Show. I am your host, Nick Clayson, excited to be with you. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice a little bit of a different setup. We did some filming today. Two things. Number one, it's not air conditioned in here, so I'm gonna be super sweaty, so just roll with that. But B, got some new lights, got some new audio equipment. One of these days I'm going to do a step-by-step, like every single thing that we did, and I'll release it to you guys. Today's not that day, but because we're in here and because I was already set, I was like, I'm just going to film in here. It's a typical day, filming day. Normally I come in early and film and then get to work on like work stuff, but today I had to get all this stuff set up because I didn't know how to use it. It was brand new, literally just ordered it last week. Came in over the weekend, so I wanted to get it all set up. So kind of displaced my time, moved it around a little bit. All that to be said, in today's episode, I want to talk about a recent Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. I'm a subscriber, love his show. If you haven't ever gone on there, go check it out. But he did a recent episode with Warren Byrd and another guy named JJ something or other. I'll put the link in the show notes. You can check it out. But it is about church planting and like the future. And at about the 1 hour 22 minute mark, Warren Byrd dropped some absolute gold that had to do with what we are dealing with in this podcast. So I want to have y'all take a listen to that and just share with you guys some of my thoughts with it. So hey, hit the link in the show notes for all the things you need, your transcript, a couple of freebies. We have motion graphics that you can get for Adobe Premiere Pro. And we also have the free ebook about uploading and posting to TikTok, all from your app. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, and we are on TikTok. So without any further ado, let's dive into this episode titled, Why Does Hybrid Ministry Matter? What do we know is staying? And where is the jury still out? Let's go. So like I said, in the most recent Carey Nieuwhof, most recent one I listened to, Carey Nieuwhof episode is out from a couple months ago. Warren Byrd dropped a couple of statements. I just want you to hear it directly from him, and then I will respond. So go ahead, take a listen.
Warren, any data or observations on church plants and technology?
Yeah, let's divide it into here to stay and the jury's still out.
Okay.
Here to stay is people check out your church by its website first. Used to be the parking lot was the first impression. The website, whatever size church you are, they're going to check it out. Mm-hmm. They're going to ask two questions fundamentally. Are people like me there? And is this is there a scary factor? Is there something that, is going to weird me out too much? Also, the newcomer connection. Now, it may not be their first week there, but scan the QR code, tell us either your email or your phone or both, and that becomes a primary communication tool. I am just amazed at especially the younger generation, so willing to give that up. But carrying it further, hybrid stuff, like my wife and I just finished a couple's marriage class at our church. We kicked it off in person. We ended it with a happily ever after party afterwards. But all the nights of the group were online. So this couple with 5 kids, they finished the last kid in bed. They flopped down on the sofa, embraced each other, and were part of the class. They would never have gotten a sitter, driven somewhere, and maybe 1 week, but not week after week after week. So the hybrid experience is here to stay. Now, where the jury is still out for churches large and small is not the evangelism and the outreach. And JJ, such a wonderful story, the California story, those will happen. And now, due to the pandemic, the gospel is in every language accessible all around the world for people to hear. It's a brilliant strategy as one of the silver linings of the pandemic. But is it primarily a member equipping and evangelistic strategy? Or is it also a discipleship strategy? Mm-hmm. Can discipleship also happen at the same level? Now, granted, I can't hug. Yeah. I can't, like Good Friday for me.
Good question.
I'm not that emotional, but every time I do one of those crosses where I nail the nails in, and that's me nailing the nails and crying. Well, I can't do that online. But in person, it moves me. So there's certain in person that is it better or is it not? And I was just last week with a bunch of executive pastors from mega churches of a particular denomination, and they're ambivalent. They're still deciding what to do. There are a few pioneers. Carey, you wrote the foreword to Tim Lucas's Liquid Church book. And Liquid Church, 5,500 before the pandemic, says, okay, we may reach thousands in person, but let's figure out how to seamlessly reach tens of thousands of people beyond that. And church plants are, with whatever their capacity level, depending on their size, are likewise saying, can we have an online impact of discipleship even beyond the broadcasting? So jury's still out on a lot of things, but I'm excited about the possibilities.
Okay, so we had a couple of things to say. The first is this. What's here to stay? The church website. I will drop a link in the show notes, but we had an episode all about church websites and how important your church website is. Just about like street to seat and all that stuff. Like, people are still looking at and viewing websites. And if you have not yet put any effort or money into your website, go ahead and do that. And honestly, what I might recommend is I would get somebody who doesn't go to your church and put them on your website and ask them what's confusing, what's broken, what's missing, what's still needed, and all of that stuff will help point you in the right direction of somebody who is going to be an outsider and is going to be utilizing and using your church website. So that's a great place to start. He also talks about next generations being willing to scan QR codes or fill out forms to give out necessary information. That is marketing 101. And so if you can capture people's name and phone number and or email, you have just about everything you need to at least get started in nurturing their relationship. Oftentimes churches want all of it all at once. Like, what's your name? What's your address? What's your email address? What's your phone number? What's your social security number? And it's like, they're not there yet, bro. Like, give them, like, trade your email address for a free mug, or trade your email address for a donation to some sort of like missions agency or something like that. But you can't get it all. But churches just get greedy and frankly lazy because they're unwilling to massage the relationship. And I can hear you on the other end, because I've been there, right? I'm like, we need all that info. And it'd be great, yeah, if we did, okay? However, like, give people time to warm up to you, all right? A lot of times people use marketing. In church, we don't talk and do a lot of like marketing type stuff, but a lot of times what needs to happen is we need to like date them first before we marry them. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times in churches, we want all the married information. Like, sign this birth certificate, sign up, you're a member now. Like, hold on. Like, I just was checking it out for 1 week. But Warren Byrd does say that there is much more willingness in the next generation to give out and distribute that type of information. And so use that to your advantage. The other thing he talked about was hybrid stuff. And this is really where I wanted to like zone in, because he talked about a Zoom class for like a marriage class that they did. That's, I think, where a lot of people's minds go when I say hybrid. And that's quite frankly one of my least favorite options. I think it's a necessary evil and can be used strategically. But like when I say like hybrid, I don't just mean like Zoom small groups. I can. I much more mean like showing up where people live their lives, in Bible reading plans, in group chats, in social media, in Facebook groups, like all types of things like that. That's what I personally mean when I talk about hybrid. And so the same is true with what he's talking about. Like, you can do those types of things, right? Like, you can make those types of classes or whatever via hybrid, via Zoom, via whatever. But that wouldn't be my only thing. I think podcasts are another amazing tool to be utilized. A lot of people have the bandwidth, desire, and willingness to listen to super long form things. And so like, if you're a pastor, you know that like you cut a lot of things out of your sermon for sake of time and brevity and whatever the case might be. A podcast is a way to give more information that might still be helpful, informative, relevant, that you don't have time to put in a sermon. And so, you know, like if you've ever preached, like, you know that there are always things that you often have to cut. And so podcasts are a great long form tool. They can also double and take place on YouTube. Okay. And so I thought what he had to say there was fascinating. And a lot of the stuff that I have talked about on this podcast, church websites, connections, hybrid stuff, he hit all of that. And so, as the creator of this podcast, I was like, yes, Warren Byrd is like the Yoda of church data and like the just like landscape of church growth and trajectories and what's next and what's coming, like all that stuff. So if he says it, I'm pumped about it, okay? What I think was interesting, and what I want to talk about a little bit, is when he talked about the jury still being out. So let's dive into that discussion a little bit deeper. All right, so he said the jury is still out, basically saying digital and hybrid work for evangelism, but do they work for discipleship? If you remember, he used a very tactical example of Good Friday and nailing the nail into a cross. And he's like, that's just so monumental and meaningful to me. And I agree with him, but that is not the only way in which people experience hands-on tactical discipleship. Especially newer and younger generations, they're much more inclined and willing to explore things through a digital lens, relationships through a digital lens, and lean more into like hybrid type of opportunities and options. And so like at my church, like what Warren broke it down to is like reaching people and or evangelism, like bringing people into your church, which I would argue is not necessarily evangelism. It's evangelism from an organizational standpoint. Like as a church organization, we have to be able, ready, willing to bring in guests. But like, is that really evangelism? I would argue evangelism is, a person taking a meaningful next step to Jesus, particularly one who doesn't classify themselves as a Christian. And more often than not, that happens in a interpersonal one-on-one relationship. That's just how I would classify evangelism. Discipleship, I think, is quite frankly the same thing. And those evangelism and discipleship used to all be one word, right? It was just telling people about Jesus and then making people more like Jesus so that they would eventually go multiply themselves in their lives into other people's lives. But we drew a line at the moment of conversion, and we switched evangelism as people who don't have a relationship with Jesus, and discipleship as people who do have a relationship with Jesus. But that's not what Warren was talking about, right? But he was talking about reaching people and then actually growing them into a mature follower of Christ. So you probably have a definition of what a disciple is at your church. Every church in America probably has some definition of what a disciple is at their church. It all is derived in some way, shape, or form, probably off of the Great Commission. At least I would argue that it should be, because that was Jesus's very deliberate, specific commands for us to go make disciples of all nations. That being said, I have a definition. We have a definition at our church about discipleship. So I wanted to explain what that is and then break down those three different elements of a disciple and talk through some hybrid ideas. Again, I'm not vouching for or saying this is successful, not successful, whatever. I'm simply just saying, if you look at the definition of a disciple, these are ways in which digital ministry and hybrid ministry can be supplemented and or utilized to help bring about a mature follower of Christ. So let's talk about that on the other side. Okay, so like I said, my church classifies and breaks down disciple. We call it a 3D disciple. Creative, whatever, I get it. Wasn't mine, so not taking any credit for it or flack for it. Just it is what it is. If you're a church media marketing manager, if you're a youth pastor, like you probably inherited something like this, unless you're the lead pastor that came up with it. In most cases, if we're on church staff, we are experiencing these things, and now we just have to figure out how to carry out the vision of where we work. That's just the reality of being in a position like this. So we have a disciple who's devoted, developing, and deployed. Okay, so devoted is simply learning how to work with God. And I thought there are tons of hybrid options in that. If we're trying to help teach someone how to walk with God, there is a really great interpersonal moment and element that can take place, especially if you have like a mentorship type relationship. And quite frankly, you should. You should do that. You should be leaning into some sort of mentoring relationship, someone who's older than you, who's further along than you, and can help take you to the next level. However, there are personal disciplines that I believe also need to take place. Bible reading, prayer, and I would argue, and I don't know that this is a widespread thought, but scripture memory. And each of those three things, Bible reading, prayer, scripture memory, I think there are ways in which you can lean into a digital option. Digital flashcards, digital fill in the blank. There's an app I use, a Bible memorization app I use for memorizing scripture. Bible reading and prayer, both in the YouVersion Bible app. There are tools and like assets and parts and pieces within the YouVersion Bible app where I can read the Bible more robustly. I can read it with friends. I can do it in community. I can pray. I can offer prayer requests. They have a daily like guided prayer moment. All of those things I think are tools. And if your church has the money, has the way, the ability, the means, the resources to pull some of those things together and create an app or create resources, all the more power to you. If not, you can just point people towards some of these other resources, curate some of the good ones that help and have helped you grow in your faith and can help other people grow in their faith as they lean more into their devotedness and their walk with God, right? Again, this is from my church's definition of a disciple. The second D, so the first D is devoted. The second D is developing. So they're devoted to Christ, they're learning to walk with God, and then they're also growing. We use this phrase, growing in the character and the competencies of Jesus. So more and more like Jesus, as well as doing more and more things like Jesus. One of the first, second, or third John, I can't remember, says, if you want to follow Jesus, you need to learn to walk as he walked. That's the competencies part, right? Doing the same things, doing the things of Jesus. And so how can we help grow people to be more, have a better character, more like Jesus, and doing more of the things like Jesus? I just actually shared in this exact seat with my students via video for a series coming up about a light bulb versus a laser. Both of them are lights, but one is an intensified, focused, and like very intentional light, and one is just illuminating the room. Both are light. One has incredible power. And I would say as you are developing into the character and into the competencies of Jesus, one of the ways to harness that is through relationships and through like direct accountability, not just friendship, not just like small group, like surface level, and maybe even a little deeper than surface level, but actual meaningful, like intentional relationships. Paul David Tripp has a quote where he says, you need to be intentionally obtrusive in somebody's life. And that's what I mean by accountability. Can you accomplish that digitally? I don't think so. There is an element of a one-on-one relationship, a need-to-need type of relationship. That being said, the accountability partner I have in my life lives 900 miles away from me. And we talk every single week, once a week, 6 a.m., every Monday morning. And it's an expected phone call. That's not in person, quote unquote. It is a life-on-life relationship, but it's done using the means of technology. That being said, we went to college together and grew up together and have raised our kids together at times. And so like there was definitely a life-on-life moment that brought us closer together that then allowed us to use technology to continue on in the relationship as opposed to just simply abandoning it, which is what often happens when distance takes place. The third one is deployed, which is simply the idea of being sent out, right? Jesus sent out the 12, then he sent out the 72, and then the 72 that they reached, he sent all those out as well. So we saw within Jesus' life 4 generations of multiplication. How can we deploy people using technology and hybrid? Again, the more like you hone this, I think, and if you have an actual nomenclature for it and strategy around it, you can build infrastructures, websites, apps, ebooks, like all kinds of things to give people regardless of where they are. And if you've sent people out overseas, you can still put resources in their hands to help them as they are reaching people, reaching their neighborhoods, reaching their coworkers, having some of these like conversations, these evangelism, these discipleship conversations. I think what Warren is saying is like there's a life-on-life moment, an aspect, an element that takes place where people grow. And I agree with that. And he's saying, can digital replace it? And again, I've said this before, but I think if we try to just if we say that a Sunday morning sermon is the only place that discipleship happens, and then by recording it and live streaming it, that's our like hybrid or like our digital option, then no, I don't think that that's actually helping people become more developed in their character and competency of Jesus, more devoted to him, more able to multiply themselves and send other people out and all the, like, just from a sermon being online, probably not. But a more robust tool, more robust resources that are out there, I think can help people, right? Like knowledge can be transferred from one person to another. An element of being devoted, an element of developing, for sure. Things that are communicated clearly and concisely through that transfer of knowledge, I think those things can happen. Can life transformation happen in hybrid? I would say yes. I don't think it looks the way we think it looks, and I think it probably requires a pretty massive overhaul to be able to do that, but I definitely think it's possible, and here's where the rub often happens. You have to have buy-in with the people who hold the money and write the checks and do those things to get some of those things up off the ground, because without that, you're simply just like the social media guy trying to do all that through Instagram posts. And can it be done? I think so. Is it the most effective way? Probably not. Probably not. And so that's how I would classify it. And that's how I would answer and respond to Warren's question about hybrid ministry. Yes, but with some infrastructure and some overhauling, for sure. Well, hey, thanks everyone for sticking around for the duration of this entire episode. I hope you found it helpful. Go listen, like, subscribe to the Carey Nieuwhof episode, especially that part about Warren Byrd. Go subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us a like. All that stuff helps us get found, indexed, and seen by the people out there on YouTube that are asking some of these same questions, like, is digital discipleship even a possibility in today's world? And because I think it is, and I think that's a meaningful message as we move forward, especially into the next and younger generations of our church members and even those people who have not yet discovered our church. Hit the link in the show notes again for full transcripts of this episode and every other episode that we have over at hybridministry.xyz. Grab the Adobe Premiere Pro transitions, grab the free ebook, go like us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, follow us on YouTube. And until next time, and as always, we're helping make digital discipleship easy. Stay